Drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from today. Now let's dive into a story that shows how one moment of encouragement can change a young person's life forever. The bustling halls of Washington Middle School were alive with the usual chaos of career day. Colorful posters lined the walls, announcing the impressive lineup of professionals who had come to share their experiences with eager young minds. Among the students moving between presentations was 12-year-old Maya Patel, her dark eyes shining with determination as she clutched a worn notebook filled with carefully written questions. Maya wasn't like the other 7th graders. While many of her classmates viewed Career Day as a break from regular classes, she had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Her dream of becoming a lawyer had taken root 3 years ago when she watched a documentary about civil rights attorneys who had changed history. Since then, she had read every book about law she could find in the school library. The morning sessions had gone well, with Maya soaking up information from various professionals. But it was the afternoon panel discussion about careers in law that she had been waiting for. She arrived early, choosing a seat in the front row of the school auditorium, her notebook open and ready. As other students filed in, Maya overheard whispers that made her stomach tighten. "Isn't that the girl who lives in the trailer park? Her mom works as a janitor at the mall." The words weren't new. She'd heard them all before, but today they stung more than usual. The panel began with introductions from local legal professionals. Maya listened intently, jotting down notes as each speaker shared their journey. When the question and answer session started, her hand was the first to shoot up. "What advice would you give to someone who wants to become a lawyer, but doesn't come from a privileged background?" Maya's voice wavered slightly, but her question was clear and direct. The response came from Richard Henderson, a well-known local attorney in an expensive suit. His laugh echoed through the microphone before he spoke. "Well, young lady, law school is extremely expensive and competitive. It requires certain advantages. Perhaps you should consider a more realistic career path for someone of your background." The auditorium fell silent. Maya felt her cheeks burn as several students snickered. She slumped in her seat, the notebook suddenly heavy in her hands, her carefully prepared questions now seeming foolish and naive. But fate had placed someone else in that auditorium that day. Usha Vance, who had been quietly observing from the side of the stage, stood up and walked to the microphone. Her presence commanded attention, though her voice was gentle when she spoke. "May I address this question?" she asked, her eyes finding Maya's. Without waiting for a response, she continued, "My name is Usha Vance, and I'm a former law clerk at the U.S. Court of Appeals and a practicing attorney. But more importantly, I'm the daughter of Indian immigrants who came to this country with nothing but hope and determination." The snickers had stopped. Every eye in the auditorium was now fixed on Usha as she moved to stand directly in front of Maya's seat. "When I was your age, people told me that girls who looked like me, who came from families like mine, didn't become lawyers. They said we didn't have the right connections, the right background, the right advantages." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But here's what I learned. The only advantage that truly matters is the fire inside you, the determination to work harder, dream bigger, and prove every doubter wrong." Maya sat up straighter, her eyes locked with Usha's, drinking in every word. The notebook that had nearly slipped from her grasp was now clutched tightly to her chest. "You asked about advice?" Usha continued, now addressing not just Maya, but the entire audience. "Here's mine. Don't let anyone else write your story. The path might be harder, the journey might be longer, but that just makes the victory sweeter. Every great lawyer I know has one thing in common, not their background, not their privileges, but their absolute refusal to give up on their dreams." The air in the auditorium had changed. Where there had been mockery, there was now attention. Where there had been doubt, there was possibility. And in Maya's eyes, there was something new, a spark of defiance replacing the earlier shame. But Usha wasn't finished. What she did next would transform not just Maya's life, but the entire way Washington Middle School thought about dreams, determination, and the true meaning of advantage. The story of how one woman's words of encouragement grew into something much bigger was just beginning. And for Maya Patel, sitting in that auditorium with her notebook and rekindled dreams, this was only the first chapter of an incredible journey. As the Career Day panel concluded, Usha Vance did something unprecedented. Instead of following the other speakers out of the auditorium, she made her way to Maya's seat. The young girl was still clutching her notebook, trying to process everything that had just happened. "May I see your questions?" Usha asked gently, gesturing to the notebook. Maya hesitated for a moment before carefully opening it to reveal pages of neatly written questions, complete with annotations and research notes in the margins. Usha's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. These weren't just casual inquiries. They showed a depth of understanding that went far beyond what she'd expect from a seventh grader. Questions about landmark cases, judicial precedent, and the evolving role of technology in legal practice revealed a mind already thinking like a lawyer. "Maya," Usha said, looking up from the notebook, "would you like to have lunch with me? I don't think we have a lot to talk about." The girl's eyes lit up with surprise and hope, but before she could respond, a sharp voice cut through the moment. "Mrs. Vance, surely you have more important things to do than—" Richard Henderson had approached, his expensive suit rustling as he gestured dismissively, but Usha cut him off with a polite yet firm smile. "Actually, Mr. Henderson, I can't think of anything more important than nurturing the next generation of legal minds. In fact," she paused, turning back to Maya, "how would you like to come shadow me at my office next week? I think it's time. We started a proper mentorship program here." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment before their full impact hit. Maya's face transformed with joy, while Henderson's expression cycled through surprise, embarrassment, and forced politeness. Several students who had lingered to watch the exchange began whispering excitedly. Principal Martinez, who had been observing from nearby, stepped forward. "Mrs. Vance, if you're serious about a mentorship program, I think we could make this something bigger. We have many students who could benefit from such guidance, and that's how the Future Leaders Legal Mentorship Program was born." What started as one woman standing up for one girl's dreams quickly evolved into something that would change countless lives. Over lunch in the school cafeteria, Usha and Maya talked about more than just law. Maya shared her story, how her mother worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat after her father's death, how she studied late into the night because their trailer was too noisy during the day, how she'd been saving her birthday money for years in the law school fund that currently held exactly $147.23. "You know," Usha said, pulling out her phone, "I still have a picture of my first law school fund. Would you like to see it?" She showed Maya a photo of a young girl proudly, holding up a mason jar filled with coins and crumpled dollar bills. "I started exactly where you are." As they talked, other students began drifting closer, drawn by the animated discussion. Soon, a small crowd had gathered, asking questions about law school, career paths, and overcoming obstacles. What was meant to be a private lunch turned into an impromptu workshop on pursuing dreams against the odds. "But how do you do it when everyone says you can't?" asked Sarah Chen, a quiet 9th grader who had joined the group. "How do you keep believing in yourself?" Usha looked around at the eager faces before her. "Let me tell you about my first day. At Yale Law School," she began. "I walked into that classroom feeling like an imposter. Everyone else seemed to come from money, from legal families, from privilege. But then I remembered something my father told me. Your disadvantages are your advantages in disguise." she continued, her voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. Because I had to work harder for everything, I was stronger. Because nothing was handed to me, I knew the value of every opportunity. Because people doubted me, I developed an unshakable determination. Those aren't disadvantages, they're superpowers. The following week, Maya's shadow day at Usha's office became the talk of the school. She returned with stories of sitting in on client meetings with their permission, watching case preparations, and even helping to research precedents for a pro bono case Usha was handling. But more importantly, she returned with a fire in her eyes that caught like wildfire through the school. Other students began approaching their teachers about career guidance. The counseling office was flooded with requests for information about college preparation and scholarship opportunities. Principal Martinez noticed the change immediately. It's like someone opened a window and let fresh air into the building. She told Usha during a meeting to formalize the mentorship program. Students who never spoke up in class are now raising their hands. Kids who seemed resigned to limiting their dreams are starting to think bigger. The Future Leaders legal mentorship program took shape rapidly. Usha reached out to her network, and soon other lawyers, many from non-traditional backgrounds, themselves volunteered to mentor students. The program wasn't just about law, it was about showing students that their circumstances didn't define their potential. Maya's mother, Mrs. Patel, could hardly believe the transformation in her daughter. She always had the dream, she told Usha during a parent meeting, wiping tears from her eyes, but now she has a path. Now she knows it's possible. The program's first major event was a mock trial competition. Maya led one of the teams, having spent weeks preparing with guidance from Usha. The same students who had once snickered at her dreams now watched in awe as she delivered a closing argument that left the audience speechless. Richard Henderson, who had been invited to judge the competition, found himself eating his words. "I have to admit," he said during the awards ceremony, "I was wrong, very wrong. What I saw today wasn't about advantages or background. It was about passion, preparation, and perseverance. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Maya discovered what Usha had been quietly arranging behind the scenes. A scholarship fund specifically for students from disadvantaged backgrounds who dreamed of legal careers had been established in partnership with several local law firms, including, surprisingly, Henderson's. "We're calling it the Dream Defenders Scholarship," Usha announced during a school assembly, "because sometimes the most important case you'll ever argue is the one for your own dreams." The impact rippled beyond Washington Middle School. Other schools in the district began requesting similar programs. Local news covered the story, leading to more professionals volunteering as mentors. A movement that started with one girl's question and one woman's stand was growing into something that could change countless lives. Through it all, Maya kept her worn notebook, now filled with new notes, advice, and dreams. But on the inside cover, she had written something new, words that Usha had shared during their first lunch together. "Your circumstances may determine where you start, but they don't have to determine where you finish." As the semester progressed, it became clear that this was more than just a story about mentorship or career guidance. It was about the power of someone believing in you when others doubt, about the impact of standing up against prejudice and presumption, and about the ripple effects that one moment of courage can create. But for Usha Vance, watching Maya and the other students grow in confidence and determination, it was also a reminder of why she became a lawyer in the first place. To help create a world where justice and opportunity weren't limited by background or circumstance. The story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to unfold in ways that would challenge perceptions, break down barriers, and inspire a new generation to dream bigger than they ever thought possible. As autumn turned to winter at Washington Middle School, the future leaders' legal mentorship program had grown into something far more significant than anyone could have imagined. What began as one woman's stand against prejudice had blossomed into a movement that was transforming not just students' lives, but the entire community's perspective on potential and possibility. Maya Patel's small trailer home had become an unlikely hub of academic activity. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, students gathered in her living room for study sessions. Mrs. Patel, who had initially been embarrassed about their modest living conditions, now proudly served homemade chai and samosas to the growing group of aspiring lawyers. "You know what's amazing?" Maya confided to Usha during one of their weekly mentoring sessions. "Nobody cares anymore that we live in a trailer park. They care about our mock trial strategies and constitutional law discussions. It's like the things that used to define us don't matter anymore." Usha smiled, remembering her own journey. "That's because you've shown them something more powerful than circumstances. You've shown them passion and purpose." The program had expanded beyond its initial scope. What started as legal mentorship had evolved into a comprehensive support system. Current law students from nearby universities volunteered as tutors. Local businesses offered paid internships. Even Richard Henderson, who had once dismissed Maya's dreams, had become one of the program's most ardent supporters. "I was wrong," Henderson admitted during a program fundraising event. "I looked at circumstances instead of capability, at background instead of potential. These students haven't just proved me wrong. They've taught me what real advantage looks like." The transformation was evident in unexpected ways. The school's debate team, led by Maya and coached by Usha, had qualified for the state championships, a first in Washington Middle School's history. Their success wasn't just about winning arguments, it was about finding their voices. One particularly memorable moment came during a practice session when Sarah Chen, the once quiet ninth grader, stood up to deliver her argument. Her voice, which had once been barely audible, now filled the room with confidence as she defended a complex constitutional point. Before this program, Sarah's mother told Usha afterward, tears in her eyes, "My daughter was afraid to order food at restaurants. Now she's teaching younger students about civil rights law. You haven't just given these kids knowledge, you've given them power." The program's impact extended beyond the students directly involved. Teachers reported a shift in classroom dynamics. Discussions became more nuanced, with students applying legal reasoning to everything from literature analysis to historical events. The phrase, "Objection, Your Honor," had become a playful but thoughtful part of everyday debate. Principal Martinez noticed another significant change. "Bullying incidents have dropped dramatically," she reported during a school board meeting. "These students have learned to resolve conflicts through mediation and rational discussion. They're not just studying law, they're applying its principles to their daily lives." The Dream Defenders Scholarship Fund had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Local law firms, inspired by the students' dedication, had increased their contributions. But more touching were the small donations that poured in from community members. $5 here, $10 there, often accompanied by notes sharing similar stories of overcoming obstacles. One day, a package arrived at the school addressed to Maya. Inside was a worn law school textbook with a note. "I was told I couldn't be a lawyer because I was a janitor's son. Now I'm a judge. Keep fighting. You're not just defending your own dreams, you're defending everyone who comes after you." The program's success attracted media attention. Local news coverage led to regional interest, and soon Maya and Usha found themselves being interviewed by national education reporters. But it was a small moment away from the cameras that truly captured the program's essence. During one of their study sessions, Maya discovered a younger student crying in the school library. Emma Rodriguez, a sixth grader, had been told by a relative that girls from her neighborhood didn't go to college, let alone law school. Without hesitation, Maya pulled out her worn notebook, the same one from that fateful career day, and shared Usha's words. "Your circumstances may determine where you start, but they don't have to determine where you finish." Then she did something more. She opened her laptop and started a video call to Usha, who immediately answered despite being in the middle of case preparation. For the next hour, the three of them talked about dreams, determination, and the power of proving doubters wrong. "You see this case I'm working on?" Usha showed them the files on her desk. "It's about ensuring equal education opportunities in underfunded schools. Every time someone tells you that you can't achieve something because of where you come from, they're not just challenging your dreams, they're revealing the biases we need to fight against." Emma left the library that day with her own notebook, ready to start her journey. Maya had passed on not just Usha's words, but her spirit of mentorship and advocacy. The program continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Students started a Know Your Rights workshop for their communities, teaching families about basic legal principles in multiple languages. They organized voter registration drives and created simplified guides to local ordinances. "This isn't just about creating future lawyers anymore," Usha explained during a school board presentation. "It's about empowering students to become advocates for justice in their daily lives." The impact on the students' academic performance was remarkable. Grade point averages rose, not just among program participants, but throughout the school. The culture of achievement and support had become contagious, but perhaps the most powerful validation came during a surprise visit from a Supreme Court justice who had heard about the program and wanted to see it firsthand. Watching Maya lead a mock trial, the justice leaned over to Usha and whispered, "This is how we change the face of justice in America, one determined student at a time." As winter deepened, the program prepared for its biggest challenge yet, a national mock trial competition where they would face teams from prestigious private schools. The stakes were high, but the students' confidence had grown from something more valuable than privilege. It had grown from perseverance. "You know what's different about us?" Maya asked her team during preparation. "Every argument we make, every case we study, every principle we defend, it's not just academic for us. We understand justice because we've seen injustice. We value opportunity because we've had to fight for it." Usha, watching from the back of the room, felt her eyes fill with tears. She remembered that day in the auditorium when one small voice dared to ask about becoming a lawyer despite the odds. That voice had become a chorus, and that chorus was becoming a movement. The story of Washington Middle School's transformation was far from over, but something fundamental had shifted. In classrooms and courtrooms, in modest homes and prestigious offices, a new generation was rising, armed not with privilege, but with purpose, not with advantages, but with determination. And for Maya Patel, sitting in her family's trailer late at night, studying by the light of a desk lamp she'd bought, with her own savings, the future had never looked brighter. Her law school fund now had more than just her birthday money. It had the support of a community that had learned to see beyond circumstances to possibility. But the next chapter of their journey would test everything they had built, challenging them to prove that their success wasn't just inspiring, it was sustainable. The real question wasn't whether they could win a national competition. It was whether they could change the very system that had once tried to limit their dreams. The National Mock Trial Championships loomed ahead, but something even more significant was taking shape at Washington Middle School. As spring brought new life to the campus, the seeds of change planted months ago were blooming in unexpected ways. The morning of the championship dawned crisp and clear. Maya stood in front of her bathroom mirror, carefully adjusting the second-hand blazer that Mrs. Chen, Sarah's mother, had altered for her. The jacket wasn't new, but it carried the dignity of purpose and the strength of community support. "Ready?" Usha asked, picking up Maya and her teammates in a rented van. The students were dressed in an assortment of borrowed and altered professional clothing, each piece representing a different story of community support. As they drove to the prestigious, private school hosting the competition, Usha shared something she'd never told them before. "When I was preparing for my first major trial," she began, "someone told me I should try to hide my background to fit in better with the legal establishment. But I realized something important. Our backgrounds aren't our weakness. They're our strength. They give us perspective that no amount of privilege can provide." The team arrived at Riverside Academy, its imposing Gothic architecture a stark contrast to their familiar middle school. As they walked through the ornate halls, Maya overheard whispers that reminded her of that fateful career day. "That's the public school team. Did you see their clothes? Are they really qualified to be here?" But this time, the whispers didn't shake her confidence. Instead, she remembered something Richard Henderson had said during their last practice session. "I once judged you by what you didn't have. Now I understand that what you have, determination, perspective, resilience, those are the true qualities of a great lawyer." The competition began with preliminary rounds. Washington Middle School's team faced off against experienced private school competitors, many of whom had been groomed for legal careers since elementary school. But with each round, something became clear. Maya's team brought something different to their arguments. When discussing a case about housing discrimination, they spoke with first-hand understanding of community impact. Their arguments about educational equity weren't just theoretical, they were personal. Their passion wasn't rehearsed, it was real. During a lunch break, Maya found herself sitting next to Catherine Windsor, a competitor from an elite private school. "How do you do it?" Catherine asked suddenly. "Your arguments, they're so authentic. We've been trained by the best coaches, but you have something we can't seem to replicate." Maya thought about it for a moment. "Maybe because we're not just arguing cases," she replied. "We're arguing for our futures, for our communities, for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong somewhere." As the day progressed, Washington Middle School advanced through the ranks. Their final round would pit them against Riverside Academy, the host school and defending champions. The case they would argue involved a complex dispute about equal access to educational resources. Before the final round, Usha gathered the team in a quiet corner. "Remember," she said, "this isn't just about winning. This is about showing the world that justice speaks in every voice, from every background. You've already proved that dreams don't know zip codes. Now go show them what real advocacy looks like." The final round began. The elegant courthouse mock-up seemed to hold its breath as Maya delivered their opening statement. She didn't just recite facts and precedents. She wove a narrative about opportunity, fairness, and the real-world impact of educational inequality. In the audience, Richard Henderson sat next to Mrs. Patel, both of them watching with tears in their eyes. "Principal." Martinez clutched her program so tightly it crumpled. And there, in the back row, sat Emma Rodriguez, the sixth grader who had once cried in the library, now watching with shining eyes as her role model showed the world what was possible. The arguments went back and forth, both teams displaying impressive knowledge and skill. But when it came time for the closing argument, Maya stood and delivered something unexpected. Instead of just summarizing their legal points, she spoke about transformation. "Your Honors," she began, "this case is about more than just legal precedent. It's about the principle that sparked the American dream, the idea that anyone, regardless of their background, can rise as far as their talents and determination can take them. When we argue for equal educational opportunities, we're not just arguing about resources. We're arguing for the right of every child to dream without limits. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judges leaned forward, caught by the authenticity in her voice. Maya continued, her confidence growing with each word. I stand before you today because someone believed in me when others didn't. She taught me that our circumstances don't define our potential. That lesson isn't just about law. It's about justice, about equity, about the kind of society we want to build. When we ensure equal access to education and opportunity, we're not just following legal precedent, we're setting moral precedent. As Maya concluded, the room erupted in applause, something unprecedented in the competition's history. The judges had to call for order, but their own eyes were bright with emotion. When the results were announced, Washington Middle School had won by a narrow margin. But the victory wasn't just in the scores. It was in the conversations that followed, in the barriers that had been broken, in the perspectives that had been changed. Riverside Academy's team was the first to offer congratulations. Their captain, approaching Maya with genuine admiration, said something that captured the day's true significance. You didn't just win the competition. You changed how we think about advocacy. The story might have ended there, with a trophy and a celebration, but real change has a way of growing beyond initial victories. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Private schools began reaching out to Washington Middle School, not to compete, but to collaborate. The Future Leaders Legal Mentorship Program expanded into a network of schools, breaking down barriers between communities. Richard Henderson's law firm established a permanent internship program specifically for students from underserved backgrounds. But perhaps the most powerful moment came a year later, when Maya returned to Washington Middle School to mentor new students. Standing in the same auditorium where her journey began, she saw a young girl raise her hand and ask the same question she had once asked. This time, the answer was different. This time, the girl heard not just from Maya and Usha, but from a community that had learned to see potential instead of circumstances, determination instead of disadvantage. As Maya opened her worn notebook to share her experiences, she realized that success isn't just about proving doubters wrong. It's about proving believers right. It's about creating a world where the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles, where dreams aren't limited by zip codes or circumstances. Usha, watching from the back of the auditorium, smiled as she saw her simple act of standing. Up for one student's dreams multiply into a movement. The legal profession was changing, not through grand gestures or sweeping reforms, but through individual acts of courage and belief. The story of Washington Middle School had become more than an inspiring tale. It had become a blueprint for transformation. It proved that when we invest in potential, when we challenge assumptions, when we stand up for dreams, we don't just change individual lives, we change the future. As the new generation of dreamers filled their own notebooks with hopes and plans, the message was clear. No dream is too big, no barrier too high, and no background too humble to keep determined spirits from soaring. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had someone believe in your dreams when others doubted. Share your story of overcoming obstacles and proving that circumstances don't define destiny. Together, we can continue building a world where every voice has the chance to speak and every dream has the room to grow.